For the first time in U.S. military history, both pilots were rescued deep inside enemy territory, and President Donald Trump says, "We got him." President Trump has announced that the U.S. has rescued the missing crew member of a military jet that was downed over Iran in what he's described as one of the most daring operations in American history. The U.S. and Iran had been searching for the airman since Friday after his F-15 fighter plane was shot down by Tehran. Mr. Trump said the rescue involved dozens of aircraft operating deep in enemy territory. The weapons systems officer was aboard a U.S. F-15 that was shot down in southern Iran. A pilot who was also on board was rescued earlier. Well, let's take a look at what Donald Trump has posted on his Truth Social website. It says, "We got him," before going on to call the rescue one of the most daring search and rescue operations in U.S. history. The president confirmed the second pilot is now safe and sound, before saying this is the first time in military memory that two U.S. pilots have been rescued separately deep in enemy territory. He then went on to say, "We will never leave an American warfighter behind." Our World Affairs correspondent Joe Inwood has the story.
It was a race against time, one the Americans seemed to have won. Across the rocky hills of southwestern Iran, local people searched for the missing weapons systems officer. A large reward had been promised. "Don't worry, he'll be found." The man says the F-15E pilot had already been rescued. Now, in what President Trump called one of the most daring search and rescue operations in U.S. history, the weapons system officer has also been found. In an online post, he wrote, "The airman was never truly alone, as they were monitoring his location 24 hours a day. We will never leave an American warfighter behind," he added. "We lost the two aircraft, and in this particular case, fate was on our side, and we've been able to recover all three of those pilots. So, I think it's going to be a morale boost. But then again, those military operations are going to be ongoing. So, we may find disappointment right around the corner." It comes amidst intensifying attacks at the heart of Iran's oil industry. Donald Trump has repeatedly threatened to destroy this country's power plants, its economy, even its desalination plants if a deal is not reached. Although these strikes appear to have been claimed by the U.S.'s main ally in this war, Israel. After we destroyed 70,
Time is running out. 48 hours before all hell will rain down on them. The Strait of Hormuz is a vital waterway, which has been effectively shut by Iran. The Revolutionary Guards released this footage, showing what they say was their 95th missile barrage of the war. This has turned into an asymmetric conflict, U.S. military muscle being met with Iranian economic pressure. It is still far from clear which will prove decisive. Joe Inwood, BBC News. Let's speak to Daniel D. Simone in Jerusalem. And Daniel, we're hearing that 5 people have been killed in Iran in strikes during the U.S. pilot rescue. That's according to Iranian media. So more details emerging of what happened during this rescue effort. That's right. So overnight, there were reports in Iranian state media about deaths during airstrikes, U.S. airstrikes, in the southwest of the country, in the southwest province, where the U.S. airman was believed to be. That total is the number you've just given. And there are more details emerging about the operation, which involved dozens of aircraft, according to President Trump.
There are reports that 2 U.S. aircraft couldn't take off from Iran, and that the Americans destroyed those aircraft themselves in order to stop them falling into Iranian hands. That was during the operation, and it said that U.S. Special Forces intimately involved in this. There's also reports that the CIA was very involved and engaged in some sort of decoy to kind of put off the Iranians and give them a false sense of what was going on. This morning, there's been no official response yet from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to the actual rescue. He's posted on social media this morning wishing a happy Easter to Christians and affirming the alliance between Israel and the U.S. against Iran. Within the last few minutes here in Israel, the Israeli military has said that is identified missiles being fired from Iran towards Israel.
How significant is this rescue mission, Daniel, for the U.S., given the tone of President Trump's statement in reaction to what happened? Well, it's very significant for the U.S. military. It's very significant for Donald Trump personally. What it means for the wider war, we don't know. The wider war has been going on since the end of February, since the last day of February. It's repeated airstrikes from the U.S. And Israel. There was, as we know, at the beginning of the war, a wish expressed by the American and Israeli leadership for there to be regime change in Iran. That hasn't happened. The Iranian military is still fighting. There are still missile and drone attacks taking place every day. As I said, Iranian missiles fired towards Israel this morning. According to the Israeli military, overnight, there was a drone attack in Kuwait and elsewhere in the region. And we've got this big deadline that's coming up tomorrow that Donald Trump set some days back. And the deadline, he says, is either Iran will make a deal and open the Strait of Hormuz, or he will follow through on these threats to destroy Iranian energy plants.
That is obviously a very severe threat that would have an enormous impact on Iranian people if it was followed through on, and that is now the big deadline that's coming up. So this operation is obviously hugely significant for the U.S. It's hugely significant for Donald Trump. What it means for wider war, we don't know. For the Iranians, the Iranian state media, once this U.S. serviceman was known to be missing, the first serviceman was rescued shortly after being downed. There was, on Iranian state media, there was talk of rewards for people who would be able to find the airman. Clearly, there was a wish within Tehran, within the Iranian military, to capture this U.S. airman alive, because that could have been used within Iranian propaganda, it could have been used as a bargaining tool, and that they were very keen to capture that person alive. The fact that hasn't happened, the fact the U.S. has been able to go in, rescue both airmen, despite all of the efforts by the Iranian military to catch him, is clearly a significant victory for the U.S. What it means for the wider war, though, we don't know, because the wider war is still going on. The Iranian military is still fighting, the Iranian government is still intact, and so this big deadline now coming up tomorrow, and I think a lot of attention is going to turn to that now. Daniel, as you say, a big morale boost for the Americans, but in terms of diplomatically going forward, do you think this could be damaging in terms of trying to get to an end point in this war? Well, Donald Trump is setting demands. He's saying he wants Strait of Hormuz to be fully opened. He wants a deal and he's saying he wants a deal to end the war. The Iranian government is saying it's also returning with its own rhetoric. Donald Trump yesterday talking about raining hell down on Iran. The Iranians last night talking about creating hell throughout the region if that happened. So there does appear to be no plausible deal in sight in the short term. So I think that really is the sense here, and I think things would have to change quite dramatically within the next day if there is to be some kind of deal. Daniel, for the moment, thank you. That's our correspondent Daniel Damone in Jerusalem. Well, let's cross over now to our correspondent in the Gulf, Lorna Gordon in Dubai for us. And Lorna, you've been telling us more about the rescue operation itself. We know that dozens of military aircraft were involved. Yeah, it's always confusing in the, initial hours following a rescue, but the details are starting to emerge. The Americans released little information over the weekend. Of course, they rescued the pilot of this F-15 on Friday. And the lack of information, I think, would have been down to them wanting to protect the operation on the ground and those probably many hundreds of special forces that were involved. What we know, as you say now, is that dozens of aircraft were involved, that the missing crew member, a colonel, had sustained injuries, but President Trump said would be just fine. He also said no Americans were killed or wounded in the operation. Reuters is reporting that Iran's Revolutionary Guards are saying several what they call flying objects were destroyed during the U.S. mission. Reports out of the United States and the networks there say that 2 U.S. transport planes, unable to take off from an Iranian airport, were destroyed to stop them falling into Iranian hands. So this was clearly a big operation with a lot of jeopardy and a moment of potential crisis for the United States. Iran was racing to find the airmen. They had offered a reward, and the U.S. could have faced a potential prisoner of war situation with these airmen being used for Iranian propaganda. They will be breathing a sigh of relief that these two crewmen, one on Friday and one today, have been rescued. But this war continues. Overnight attacks have continued here in the Gulf. In Bahrain, a fire was extinguished at one of the containers in an oil storage facility there. Saudi Arabia say they intercepted and destroyed cruise missiles in the recent hour.
In the UAE, several fires broke out at a pro-chemical facility in Abu Dhabi. Often, these are caused by falling debris from interceptions. And in Kuwait, a government ministry, an oil refinery, and 2 water and power desalination plants were attacked. No one has been injured there, but the 2 electricity plants have gone offline. And Lorna, just going back to not far from where you are, what's happened in Abu Dhabi, we know that there have been those fires that authorities say that they have been dealing with because of the falling debris due to what we think is a drone interception strike. So this just shows really the impact of this war and how much it's lingering. It's relentless. Every day, most of the Gulf states are experienced drone and missile attacks by Iran, which Iran says are in retaliation for the U.S. and Israeli strikes on it. There has been in recent days what looks to be a rise in the number of attacks that the UAE is experiencing, again, ahead of that latest deadline that the U.S. president has given. They move often to reassure people living here, saying that most of the damage is being caused by falling debris from successful interceptions. But, people are still dying, people are still being injured, and the economic cost of this war is mounting.
Lorna, what do you make of the tone of President Trump's statement in reaction to this rescue mission?
He sounds relieved. He sounds jubilant. He is seizing this as a victory. He is calling it the most daring, most courageous rescue operation by the U.S. military. I think it's interesting. The U.S. ambassador to the UN is saying that America is breathing a sigh of relief. They do get behind their servicemen when they find themselves in difficult situations. They have large operations behind their combat missions so that if something goes wrong, these plans kick into place and rescues can be carried out. But there is always no guarantee that there will be success, and this serviceman was in a mountainous region of southern Iran. He was behind what President Trump called enemy lines. So, there was high risk, a lot of danger on the ground involved in rescuing this crewman who was one of 2 on that F-15 jet that went down on Friday. Lorna, thank you very much. That's Lorna Gordon in Dubai for